Hi everyone, this is Jason Barrick of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. He's a superstar now. The last time he was on was, I think, in May of 2016. Since then, he has over 15 million views on YouTube, over 143,000 subscribers on his channel. He is former contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine, Business Insider, and Huffington Post. And he was actually the front page story on Zero Hedge shortly before the November 2016 election. David Seaman, thank you for joining me again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, David, and congratulations on all the success that you've had lately. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, really, I should be thanking Ariana Huffington and the current editors of the Huffington Post because they are indirectly responsible for all of this. You know, I had a column there, and I had that column because they reached out to me because they liked my videos. I definitely did not reach out to them. I didn't apply for anything there. They reached out to me. They liked my content and my views, or at least I thought they did. And they gave me this column where I could write whatever I wanted, and it would be published immediately on their site. And so the one about Hillary Clinton's health hit their top trending on their homepage. And at that point, they locked my account, got rid of my column. And to this day, I haven't been given any explanation, but just for whatever reason, they kicked in that Streisand effect that everybody knows about. You know, you read any marketing book, they all tell you that the best kind of viral thing is the Streisand effect, but they tried to shut down this Hillary's health narrative, not just with me, but with anybody who was trying to surface it. You know, the liberal media really tried to do that, and it ended up being one of the most viral stories ever. This issue, you know, where like she comes across as healthy on the interviews, but there's all this circumstantial evidence that she's not healthy at all and that she's kind of lost her marbles from 2012 onward, at least. And so that was this big viral story that I think helped propel Trump into the White House. And of course, the mainstream media will never acknowledge this because they were trying to silence it. But I caught part of that groundswell. And yeah, it's been kind of crazy. So.
Yeah, they called Hillary's health, anyone who was questioning it was a conspiracy theorist, and yet, you know, in the WikiLeaks documents, we found out from Uma Abedin talking about Hillary having 12 seizures a day. We had doctors who were looking at her medical condition, post YouTube videos. I saw a bunch of those, actual medicine doctors, and they said it looks like she had advanced stage Parkinson's, and she was on a levodopa pump and other, you know, experimental drugs with nasty side effects, just so that way she could get in front of the TV camera and look reasonably coherent for a debate. And then she would go sleep for 2 or 3 days straight, and she wasn't doing, you know, any press conferences. And I think one of the main reasons that Trump didn't win the election, and there was a bunch of them, but that Trump was, you know, doing all these rallies, doing all these press conferences during the election, and he just had so much more energy to campaign compared to her.
Yeah, that and Trump was brilliant, I think, because he realized the internet is to some extent rigged, just like the mainstream media. So he went to all these cities that are not really on the map in terms of not being media cities the media is always covering, like cities other than Detroit and Chicago and New York and Austin, Texas and Los Angeles. Instead of just focusing on them, he focused on these other cities that have good populations and totally like subverted whatever Google and YouTube were doing at the time, allegedly. He subverted all of that because he just kickstarted his own word of mouth, right, person to person. And he doesn't use email. You know, people have asked, why hasn't WikiLeaks done similar damage to Trump that they did to Hillary's people? Part of it is that he doesn't use email. He was smart enough to really never entangle himself in that communication format. So he never has to worry at night if some, you know, hacker has phished his email account and is sending it off to WikiLeaks as we speak. He doesn't have to worry about that. So that was very smart of him. For whatever reason that he chose it initially, I think it's worked to his advantage. And I don't know anybody else in a position of power who's free from email like that, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Well, he's not free from Twitter. So Twitter is his tweets are good.
Yeah, no, and he doesn't delete his old tweets. So I retweeted one today from, I think, 2012 or 2013, where he said something like, you know, no mercy for the terrorists, get these dumb bastards. And it's great that he leaves that stuff up there because you know where his thought process has been the whole time.
Yeah, and I mean he's been criticizing these trade deals for decades. He's been spending big money to put ads in the New York Times explaining why NAFTA was bad. So it wasn't just Ross Perot who was saying that there was a big sucking sound that a lot of American jobs were going to be leaving the U.S. But yeah, that was a great point there about Trump campaigning with his energy and social media. I mean, he flipped 3 states that the Democrats just didn't think he could flip in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So he did what basically Ronald Reagan was able to do in 1980. He followed that path and was able to flip traditionally Democratic states that really haven't voted Republican for many decades.
Yeah,
Well,
it was so interesting. People don't acknowledge what an upset it was because the media is not celebrating it. People have said why wasn't the inauguration as big a deal as Obama's? Well, you had the whole corporate media spectrum in 2009 cheerleading that their puppet got in. And so that's why you had all of this celebration. And this time around, these anchors on TV look nearly suicidal. So they're definitely not encouraging people to go to the inauguration. And, you and I were there. I saw a big turnout. I wasn't counting heads. But no, I don't think the mood was as celebratory as Obama's in 2009. And that's because this is not a fake inauguration, and a lot of people in D.C., as you can probably attest to, they're secretly very depressed about this because they're basically going to lose their sources of income when their left-wing think tanks dry up in the next 6 months and they have to leave D.C. and get a real job,
yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic he will be able to trim some of the fat. We're seeing some of that already. You brought up the mainstream media and how heartbroken they are. I mean, the mainstream media is just so biased nowadays. Decades ago, I don't think they were this biased, but there's so many more Democrats than Republicans, and we know now from the WikiLeaks Podesta emails just how in cahoots the mainstream media was with, trying to make sure that Hillary Clinton won the election. I called out Jake Tapper on CNN. I was telling you this story because I'm good friends with Charles Ortel. I've known him for years. He's a famous value investor on Wall Street, and he's considered one of the best forensic accountants. And over the last 2 years, since he made enough money to retire early, he's been, looking into the financials of the Clinton Foundation, and he went through proving that, they're the world's largest charity fraud, over $100 billion in and out of the Clinton Foundation over the last 15 or 20 years. And he gave Jake Tapper a copy of all these documents. Jake Tapper then, this was in March of 2016, March or April, he even interviewed him on recording for an hour or so and said that they were considering doing a segment, and then, nothing. They just sat on it. It's really sad that, there's mountains and mountains of evidence, but, people like David Brock and the Media Matters and Hillary Clinton and George Soros and other scumbags can just make a couple phone calls or emails and kill the truth.
Yeah, well, it sounds kind of eerily similar. So what you're saying happened to Charles Ortel. That's pretty much like just gathering intel to see what he knows possibly and wasting his time, because it seems eerily similar to what The Daily Show did to me, where I had this hour-long phone call pre-interview with one of their producers for nearly an hour, which, just because this story was so hot at the time, I didn't have all that much free time, and so I give this pre-interview. And she wants every single little detail, like every small aspect of Pizzagate. What do I know? What is the basis for my views on this? Where is this information coming from? Is it all based on the WikiLeaks, etc.? Like a real interrogation. And I went along with it because I thought, okay, if this is what I have to do to get on a show that's viewed by millions of people so that they can look at these facts and come to conclusions on their own, if that's what I have to do, fine. But, when they abruptly canceled on me the day before they were supposed to fly out to film the segment, that makes me wonder, was this just a thing to waste my time and to figure out what I know? Because it sounds like exactly what Jake Tapper did to Charles Ortel.
Yeah, Jake Tapper, I called him out on Twitter, and he said that she lost the election. It's not worth covering. That's what he told me. This was a month or so ago, after the election, and I was calling him out because Charles told me the story, and Charles still thought that Jake Tapper may eventually run the story. Now I told Charles, man, there's no way it's going to happen. So it's just really messed up. Did you hear the story about Peter Schiff?
Well, hold on 1 second. That shows you right there, in my opinion. And, this is only allegedly about Jake Tapper, what I had said before. But it really leads further credence to my view that Jake Tapper is not a journalist. What kind of journalist, if you've been given a great story, sits on it because of political consideration? It should not matter if she won or lost. As a journalist, if somebody comes to you and shows you, interesting data that this huge charity that everybody assumes is this awesomely beneficial thing for mankind is actually a steaming pile of garbage on a criminal level, wouldn't you want to air that as a journalist? Or otherwise, what he is not a journalist. He's just a court jester,
He's a highly paid PR agent, for PR consulting. Yeah, he's a PR propaganda, company spin agent. I mean, his wife, it's just ridiculous. Like here in DC, they have so many good pizza restaurants, and his wife, you ran the story. I found this out from you on Twitter and in your videos. His wife's favorite restaurant is Comet Ping Pong Pizza. There's dozens of better pizza places in DC than Comet Ping Pong Pizza. So we know now from like that Disrupt J20 video that James O'Keefe of Project Veritas released, that that seems to be, the meeting place for nefarious radical Democrats to discuss, non-legal actions.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word radical. It's so interesting because I was reading this blog post recently, and then I condensed it into a video on my own. But basically, we forget because we're only 20 or 30 or 40 years old or whatever. We forget that history started way before any of us. And if you want to look at why our political system is so messed up, it really goes way back to the amounts of wealth that was created during and shortly after the Industrial Revolution, to the point where a handful of people really held all of the capital, and they were starting to get some credible attacks from different ideologies like anarchy and communism. Those were taking off just with the masses, with random, segments of the population. And so to kind of appease that stuff and to prevent an outright revolution, at this point, long before any of us were born, it's well documented that these wealthy people said, okay, let's start to fund these social democrats around the world. Let's start to fund these leftist social democratic movements so that we don't get our heads chopped off, right? We're going to give the public a little bit of welfare, a little bit of equal rights discussion, a little bit of identity politics, and we're going to give them this sense that things are moving forward. In other words, that things are progressive. And over time, though, because of globalization, the good jobs in America and in Europe have been bled away, and they're now all in China and India and places like that. And so that's been disrupted, and those jobs are probably not coming back anytime soon. And what's left of these social democratic parties are just identity politics and are just these nonsensical social movements because they no longer have jobs to offer people. So they're just turning these unemployed and underemployed ideological leftists, they're turning them into martyrs, martyrs for a failed movement of these lazy industrialists generations ago who basically funded the wrong side, knowing they were doing so, but just, afraid of their own possible demise. So that's how I see it. And it started way before any of us. But now that we know, we should definitely, as I say on Twitter, we should push back. These movements are not organic. A lot of them are literally paid by various interests. And these people, I call these people perma-protesters because it seems like they're always protesting. Like it seems like there's an actual career path who just want to cause trouble. And I fully support righteous protests. But where were these people during 8 years of Obama, bombing anybody that moves in certain Middle Eastern countries? I didn't hear any protests then.
Yeah, those are great points. I think, I'm pro First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, but there's a huge difference between a peaceful protest and, breaking windows, blowing up limousines with Molotov cocktails, beating people up, throwing batteries at them, assaulting them, hurting them really badly.
Not to mention, there's a big difference between peaceful protests and meeting up at Comet Pizza, as that Project Veritas video showed that you mentioned. Meeting up at Comet Pizza to discuss using butyric acid against people at the Deplorable. And you and I were there. I'm glad that plot was foiled. But how scary is that? It shows you how close to home these sickos can hit.
Yeah, I have friends who didn't want to go because they were anticipating something like that, weeks before the deplorable tickets went on sale. So they were too scared to even go because they thought something like that could happen.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you now about how James Comey of the FBI has not been fired yet. When I look at James Comey's background, I see a lawyer that worked in the military-industrial complex. He was on the board of directors at one of the most corrupt large Wall Street investment banks that's routinely been fined billions of dollars for money laundering for drug cartels. And then he ended up appointed at the FBI. And, the evidence for me for Pizzagate and so many of these other crimes with the Clinton Foundation seems overwhelming. Do you think Trump's trying to use him, trying to flip him to turn on the other people involved in this conspiracy before, and that's why he's not been fired?
I obviously have no idea, but if I put myself in Trump's shoes for a second, and if you do the same thing, it seems to me that if he's good to Comey, the only reason why is that Trump must believe that Comey acted in a way that was way more kind of fair and kind of justice-based than he could have in an alternate universe. The Clintons made an attempt at total control, at basically owning everybody, and it seems like at the last minute we did kind of get a functioning FBI that was able to warn a segment of the public that there's something off here, that, we're not done with the emails. None of this stuff has been formally cleared. And there's very much still something worth looking into. And I think that their messaging on that, much to the disappointment of the mainstream media, their messaging was, I guess, better than it could have been. So maybe that's what Trump's thinking. Or maybe Comey just has, as you mentioned, lots of connections in certain places. I don't know. So
I think Comey knows where the bodies are buried because he's been involved, with large companies and doing deals for a long time. Even before he got involved with the largest corporations, he was involved in some other stuff. I don't know if you've seen any of George Webb's videos on the internet yet about the Clinton Foundation. He's been connecting some of the dots to some of the other illegal businesses all over the globe the Clinton Foundation has been involved in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've looked at a couple of them. I find them kind of hard to follow, but I looked at a couple of them. And yeah.
Yeah, so I think Trump is trying to clean things up a lot. He just got rid of a lot of people at the State Department, and we know from the WikiLeaks emails that those people, were giving heads up to Hillary Clinton and Podesta that, oh, you have to get rid of the server, oh, you have to, destroy your Blackberries and your tablets because the feds are coming. We were just given a notice of inquiry. So I think it's good that Trump offered them like a choice of either being fired or resigning.
Well, I guess people, all the people who were connected to the Clintons to such an extent that they were really Clinton loyalists rather than Americans, and rather than loyalists to the Constitution and to just very basic concepts of justice and fairness. All those people have to go, and I think Trump is aware of that. And luckily, Trump's operating in a world where if the media calls him a dictator for getting rid of these people who are absolute garbage, of just relieving them of their public duties, which makes sense to me, seems like the logical thing to do. If the media starts up this whole ramble that he's a dictator, luckily none of us believe them anymore. I saw some poll, someone tweeted out that level of trust in the corporate media is sitting at around 16%. So, if I handed in a test on an exam, if I handed in an exam that had a 16% correct ratio, that's an F, right? So the media has totally failed. Nobody trusts them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But they're still making money though, so it seems to me like they double down. So basically anytime Trump puts out a tweet, they're looking for a way to spin this, to blow it out of proportion, and the mainstream media is definitely trying to figure out a way to impeach him.
No, you're exactly right. They doubled down. Instead of apologizing and stepping away, which is what they should have done, toning it down, go back to actually being something that we would perceive as news organizations. They've made it more obvious that they really are billionaires' blogs, to borrow the phrase from Mike Cernovich. And that's what they are now. The Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and Jeff Bezos pushes his own political agenda. And Carlos Slim owns the New York Times, and the New York Times definitely has an anti-Trump agenda. everything is cast in an anti-Trump light. If there's bad weather somewhere, they try to find a way to tie it to Trump. So I think that people luckily see through that at this point. It's going to be very hard for them to stir up enough dissent to get this guy impeached, because he has the people's support. Mathematically, he has it, and he has the House and Senate to go along with him. So it's going to be really hard for them to oppose him in some meaningful way, especially when there are no emails, as we have with Podesta and Hillary, no emails for people to look through. I don't see Trump going down without a fight, and I see him getting a lot of stuff done. I can't explain the Comey thing, but other than that, it seems like he's picking good people. It seems like Kelly was a good pick for DHS, and obviously I'm in favor of Pompeo for the CIA director position. It's good that he got that. So it seems like he's getting some fresh blood in there,
Yeah, and on CNN, I was at the gym a couple days ago on Monday, and they were running TV commercials saying how, Jeff Sessions is a racist. You have to call your congressman at this number, and we want to make sure and block him because I guess, Sessions really hates the Clintons. And so they were trying to go to Obama to get a pardon, and thank God Obama didn't pardon them. But, if Sessions gets in there as Attorney General, I think he will probably prosecute, because I've heard he really hates the Clintons and knows how corrupt they are.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I think it's long overdue. So.
Yeah, I mean, they've gotten away with so many scandals for so freaking long. It's ridiculous. To add to your point there about the Washington Post and the New York Times, you should actually come to a Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity conference next time they have one. I was at one in D.C. in September, and there was a former CIA agent there, and he basically said that the CIA pays the Washington Post and the New York Times to hand them articles and for them to read them, the foreign policy articles on TV. So that was straight from a former CIA agent's mouth, that there's certain talking points from the CIA and Pentagon that the New York Times and the Washington Post just repeat verbatim.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we saw from the Podesta emails. We saw that there's basically a stenographer relationship. And then I don't know if you saw it or you heard me see it or you heard me mention it on my YouTube channel, but I was going into a couple times how in the Hillary Clinton emails on WikiLeaks, it seems like Sidney Blumenthal, this longtime Clinton advisor who communicates with her, it seems like he's ghostwriting an article that makes fun of the concept of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers having a lot of political influence, while in the same batch of leaked emails, it seems like Hillary Clinton is very much influenced by those two families, both in terms of where she spends her time with meetings and just based on her personal communications,
Yeah, those are good points. And you called out Lynn Rothschild of The Economist on Twitter, right? And she blocked you. And she claims to be a proponent of inclusive capitalism, but yet she's a huge hypocrite, right? She has, I saw in your last few videos, she has a $100,000 plate charity dinner. So that's not exactly inclusive capitalism.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, and if people want to watch the summary of those claims, the video is called "The Rothschilds Exposed." I think it's 2 or 3 videos back on my channel. And yeah, I mean, she publishes The Economist, and during this past election cycle, it turned into a total pro-Hillary rag. And they use their status as an economic publication to push an agenda, and that's what I go into, among other things. But yeah, it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me that she claims to be for inclusive capitalism while hosting these totally pretentious $100K per plate dinners for Hillary. They're like something out of a comic book, It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's a bunch of hypocritical, rich Democrats there from Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street telling themselves, that they're not hypocrites.
Pretty much.
That's Gerald Celente. I don't know if you listen to Gerald Celente's work, but he would have said some funnier cuss words about that. He would have called it like the Circle Jerk Club or something like that.
Yeah, no, okay, they have a worldview that just keeps getting self-reinforced. And to go back to what you said earlier, the mainstream media, what's left of it, they've chosen to double down on attacking our newly elected president and they've chosen to double down on ignoring every single email in the Podesta emails, So they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place because not only are they alienating the Trump supporters, they're alienating anybody who's interested in the truth, and that's a large percentage of people. So it's probably going to end poorly for them. I could see them losing revenue and then having to downsize some of their overpaid personalities. And from there, why would people watch if it's a bunch of nobodies? And I could see it being a vicious cycle of shrinking market size as people like you and me continue to pick up the slack. I see that definitely coming.
Did you see that the New York Times has their top floors of their building? They're already renting it out to make extra money because they're losing so much money running the newspaper.
Wow, that's incredible. But it makes sense. They can't continue this stuff forever. They still have to face economic laws, and they're spending money putting out propaganda every morning. People are sick of it. It's just not interesting.
Yeah, Bezos and Carlos Slim, who own the New York Times and the Washington Post respectively now, they've basically been running both at a loss. So they're using it for PR spin to make their reputations look better from their other businesses.
Yeah, luckily, I think people are figuring it all out. So
now for Pizzagate, do you know if the New York Police Department, which supposedly got this enormous, 650,000 emails and videos and stuff on computers, do you know, since you have better contacts with that than I do, if they're actually continuing that investigation, or when the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch order them to stop, if they actually stopped, or they're going to move forward now with Trump?
I don't know the details, but I think that my hope would be that the Justice Department acts in a more impartial way as soon as Sessions is confirmed. So,
yeah, I really hope so too. I mean, we just have so many people here who are rich or politically connected or both, who are above the law in the United States, and that's just not why the United States was founded. I mean, we were founded for limited government, low taxes. The government was supposed to enforce the Constitution, not the government was supposed to protect itself with all these rules, regulations, and crony deals and stuff.
Well, when I was in town for the inauguration, I was blown away by how good all the restaurants were. Amazing food. And in certain parts of D.C., it's a really amazing quality of life. But then I was thinking, where is this prosperity coming from? Because it's not like when you're in San Francisco and you're like, oh, okay, it's coming from Uber and it's coming from Twitter and it's coming from, a bunch of other tech companies. And it's not like in L.A. where you go, oh, okay, it's coming from the kind of residual money from decades of prosperity in Hollywood. It's not coming from that stuff. It's basically coming from like controlling and parasitically regulating, I should say over-regulating the rest of us, regulating our lives, regulating the decisions and lifestyles of people who live thousands of miles away, and then lobbying that stuff to make money at every step of the way rather than just coming up with decent, honest policy, making money off of it. And so it starts to gross you out almost. It's like, why is there so much prosperity here and not in the rest of the country aside from cities I mentioned where there's a real economic reason?
Yeah, DC is a giant bubble, and it's very distorted from reality. Here in the bubble here, we have, nonstop. You were here, for the inauguration in Deplorable, so you saw the construction cranes. There's nonstop construction here. They just keep building further and further out in the suburbs, luxury homes, new restaurant communities, stuff like that. When I moved here in 2000, it wasn't nearly as built up. So there was a lot of chain restaurants out around here where I live in Northern Virginia, and the quality has improved a lot. But yeah, I think a lot of the money is based off the parasitical behavior of government that's been built around here with these government contracting companies, government consultants, NGOs, lobbyists, stuff like that.
Yeah, just to give you one example, all those lobbyists who make money for big pharma and for big prisons, they pull in big salaries, basically keeping humanity down. I was talking to a doctor recently, an MD, who honestly believed some of the drug war hype. And only recently, now that some real medical journals are coming out about this stuff, he realized he was wrong, and that the way he described it, the biopharmacology of some aspect of cannabis is just really useful for treating various illnesses in a way that cannot be really disputed. And he was like, wow, we've really been lied to by the government. It was not about public health. It was about something else. And yeah, it was about making money, right? So you had people sitting in lobbyists, these intermediaries, promoting antidepressants for everybody in the 1990s, and now just promoting huge, jackups in prices for all kinds of drugs. And so this lawyer lobbyist class is making money off the rest of us. And Trump called that out in his inauguration, and it went over. I think around the country people liked it, but it didn't go over well in D.C. It made people realize how they've been living off the rest of us.
Yeah, my dad's a retired doctor, and to add to some of your points there, I mean, they don't teach you a lot of the proper things that people learn through trial and error about their health, whether it's, not taking too many prescription medicines. The other one thing that doctors don't learn in medical school that they should is they don't learn proper nutrition. So you had a lot of doctors that were recommending, the government food pyramid. So people were eating way too many carbs, way too much sugar, they were getting fat and diabetes. And, with my own health problems, I got sick like that, and I had to drastically cut down on carbs, and now I eat a lot more vegetables, and I have a lot more lean proteins, and I feel a lot better. So hopefully, the doctors will figure out that they've been lied to for a long time. But, when you have that much educational training, there's tons of people here in D.C., David, that have 2 or 3 degrees, PhDs in something or other, women's studies or early childhood education, and they work their way up the government ranks. They don't like being told they're wrong.
Yeah, no, there's a real regime that's been built up, not just the Obama people and the Clinton people, but I think academia. There's definitely been a regime of people saying for 30 years, oh, cannabis is a drug and everything that's psychoactive is bad. And like you mentioned, the first food pyramid was nonsense. And back in the day, if you go back far enough, doctors recommended smoking cigarettes as, a digestive, basically. So they've definitely been wrong in the past.
Yeah, and I think they were paid by the cigarette companies too. So there was doctors in those. I've seen some of those cigarette ads. I think the doctors were paid to do the ads, and I don't even think there was any disclosure. And the government at one point was actually encouraging this. So you got to go back and look through history, and you got to try to figure out what the truth was, but sometimes that's hard. I want to ask you before I let you go, I know we have a time constraint. I want to ask you about these tariffs that Trump is talking about on Mexico and China. Are you worried about trade wars and how that could affect jobs in the economy?
I think what happened is we were already in a trade war, and our enemies were smart enough to infiltrate us and to have our media replaced with idiot media, with idiocracy, fake media. So we were focused on the wrong issues. And meanwhile, you look around and it's like, we're not really making anything anymore. And aside from the next Travis Kalanick, who makes the next kind of Uber app that increases efficiency for people, aside from that stuff, like most of us are not, we're not pulling ahead economically. And it's because you look around, nothing is built here anymore. It's all built overseas, and then we ship it in. And so meanwhile, China has their own domestic market, and they have their own companies that they support over ours. They want people shopping on Alibaba, not on eBay. And they want people using the domestic Uber, not Uber. So why can't we do the same thing? We're one of the largest economies in the world. Why can't we Americanize if that's where the world is heading anyway? And so I think the Chinese were doing it, and we were just kind of dumbed down. And now it's like, oh shit, we're actually in a trade war. So yeah, I think it'll become more obvious, but I think it had already started, and now we just realize that we have to fight back.
Yeah, I've been trying to talk on my channel that there's no such thing as real free trade anymore, that all these governments basically cheat. They either put tariffs on trade partners' goods so people won't buy them, or they manipulate their currency and exchange rate. Many governments are doing this.
Oh, yeah, and China is among the worst offenders, right? They keep devaluing their own currency, so...
Well, I mean, the U.S. does it a ton, too. Look, the value of the dollar over the last 100 years, since the Federal Reserve was created, the dollar's lost 96% of its purchasing power. So why did that need to happen? So because we have central banks in general, and we have, large financial institutions that are too big to fail, and they get, trillions of dollars to borrow and speculate with on stocks, bonds, and real estate at 0% interest, that's not fair either. So the money hasn't gone to the people on Main Street. Not that anyone should get, those trillions of dollars to begin with, but very little of that money that was printed after the 2008 financial crisis went to the people on Main Street. So
Well,
I think
same exact. I do have to head out in a second, but the same exact people, pretty much the same exact class of people in academia and in D.C., these lobbyist think tank lawyers, they are the same people who are promoting that cannabis has no medical benefit. They're also promoting that central banks are the answer to everything, and that we should cede more and more of our personal power over to these central bank created currencies. And they're equally wrong about both things. So hopefully when Trump opens up the Federal Reserve's books, he'll tell us what he actually sees. And I think that's been his MO so far, is to tell us the truth. I'd rather just be told where we're at economically for real, rather than be kept on life support by China, So thanks again for this interview. This has been a lot of fun.
Great. And if our listeners want to follow your work, how do they do so? I know you're on Twitter again. You're back on Twitter, but you're also on Gab AI and on YouTube?
Yeah, I prefer Gab.ai because the founder of it is very pro-free speech, whereas Twitter is run by, this, I don't even know what to describe him, this tech despot, Jack Dorsey, who has just been shutting down so many good accounts. But for the time being, a lot of people use Twitter, so that's why I came back there to kind of fight the information war there. And here on YouTube, if you search for my name, that's probably the best way to find my stuff. But yeah, Twitter or Gab are both good. So.
And I'll put a link for our listeners there to take a look at your channel if they're not familiar. Well, you've had an amazing last 12 months, David. Congratulations on your success. I hear you're planning on launching a TV network soon, so good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll definitely have to stay in touch in terms of finding ways to grow the independent media. So
I would really enjoy that because, I'm getting screwed by YouTube as well. I mean, they've cut our traffic in half in the last 6 months. They've cut our ad revenue down by 80%. They're removing our subscribers as well. And I haven't even done a Pizzagate videos. These are just actual videos talking about what's really going on in the economy.
No, they're like the Uber of content, right? We create the content and they're the algorithm and the app, but they're taking a heavy toll on some of us. So, we definitely need to find alternatives.
Yeah, I'm tired of the big Silicon Valley Democrats. They're doing censorship on people like us with our free speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
Okay, great, man. Well, thank you for your time, and let's do this again soon.
Sounds good. Let's set something for like 2 months from now. How's that sound?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, man.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Mo and I are trying to raise $1,000 per month for our Patreon account. We have over 2,600 viewers per YouTube video, so if we can get most of our loyal listeners or all of our loyal listeners to donate $1 per month or up to $5 per month, which would be amazing, that would cover most, if not all, of the money that we need. So we also accept one-time donations if you go to the wallstreetformainstreet.com website. We accept donations in cash via PayPal. Fiat, you can donate there. You can donate Bitcoin through our Bitcoin wallet there on the website, or you can donate gold and silver. We have a gold money account, and we also accept mailed donations of physical gold and silver. Thank you guys for listening, and we appreciate any and all help. Please forward it to friends. Okay, bye.